In order to grow to be a DJ, like a top-notch DJ, you have to align yourself with some pretty important people. Some of the movers and shakers in your city. Well, New York City, since we're speaking on New York City right now.
You are now listening to the BV Mobile Apps Podcast. The show is designed to help you grow your mobile app audience and get advice from experts in your industry. Now, here's your host, Sean Garvey.
Good day, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the BV Mobile Apps Podcast. I am the architect here, Sean Garvey. Everybody, please stay tuned. Towards the end of the podcast, we're going to give you information on how you can get your app customized through the kind folks at BV Mobile Apps. So please stay tuned for that important information. But joining with us today on the BV Mobile Apps Podcast, we have a seasoned veteran, 30 years in the DJ game, representing Bushwick, Brooklyn, and he's the son of a DJ and whose mother was also an avid record buyer weekly and surrounded by just so much great old school music. He is a professional DJ, a part of the worldwide iconic Fleet DJs, and he also spins mixes on multiple radio stations. We're going to get into all that and more a little bit later on in the podcast too. And we're going to do a continuation of today's theme, resources for DJs and radio stations. We did a podcast previously talking about resources for DJs in Atlanta, but we're going to take it to the East Coast and provide information to DJs in the New York area that are looking for resources on how to get your DJ game to the next level. And what better way to represent New York by having a New Yorker on the phone line right here on the BV Mobile Apps Podcast. We have DJ Skinny
Yes,
on
sir.
the telephone line. Welcome to the BV Mobile Apps Podcast. How you doing?
I'm all right. Thanks for having me.
Worldwide Fleet DJs. Iconic organization. You've been with them for a good minute, and you also have a history. You have an amazing history in the DJ game. So I want to take a moment to talk to you about your upbringing in the DJing game and how you got on with the Fleet DJs before we actually get into today's theme, which is a continuation from a previous podcast that we've done on resources for DJs, but this time we're going to talk about resources for DJs and radio stations in New York. But let's start off by talking about the genesis of DJ Skinny from Bushwick, Brooklyn, to where now you are a part of the Fleet DJs. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Oh man, that's crazy. It started for me as you mentioned, my father was a DJ, and my mom always bought records on payday. So she would come in the house with a bag of records. And on the weekends, when it's time to clean up the house and chores and everything like that, she would play those records all day, every day. Once the DJing started to pique my interest, I probably was about 6 years old. I don't know if you're familiar with block parties, but in New York City,
I am.
In the summertime, we have these block parties. And every time we have a block party, every year, they're annual events. Anytime I would disappear, my family always knew where I would be at. If they come up to the DJ, I'm right there by the DJ just watching them, studying. So fast forward through me watching, then I discovered, Mr. Magic, Rap Attack, Red Alert, Chuck Chill Out, Marley Marl. And then I just started studying those tapes. I would listen to them avidly. Get my tape, brand new cassette tape, pop it in, record. I would listen to it as I record, and then I would go back and listen to it some more. So around the time that I want to say 8 years old, for Christmas, my mom bought me a pair of turntables and a mixer. It wasn't the top of the line Technique 1200s that, were primarily being used at that time. She did buy me up 2 turntables and a mixer because she saw how interested I was in, watching the DJs, and it struck my interest. So I would say around the time I turned 9 years old, maybe like a year later, I started doing like the family barbecues and the backyard parties and all the family events, they called me. So from there, it was just no looking back. And, that's how I got my start in the DJ game. Just watching other DJs, the OG DJs from the neighborhood, as well as the DJs that were spinning on the radio at that time.
If you had to compare the DJ game growing up to another profession, what would you compare it to? And you're the first DJ that I'm asking this question to, because just like with what I do, which is radio broadcasting, I had someone tell me once upon a time, Sean, radio broadcasting is just like retail. It's like working in a retail store. Because 90% of what you do is for the advertisers. It's about selling the product to the consumer, which is the radio listeners, which are the radio listeners. But what about you? How would you compare? What would you compare the DJ game to as far as profession goes?
I would more so compare it to television. And the reason why I say television, just because you're there, that doesn't mean that people will like you or like the music you play. Just like there's a million TV shows, but you only going to watch the ones that interest you. You know what I'm saying? So as a DJ, you have to pique people's interest in wanting to listen to you as a DJ. It's not just because you're a DJ that, people are interested in listening to you. It's how you prepare the records and you put the records together and the way you make people dance when you put these records together. So if anything, I probably would compare it to television because you have to make people want to watch your TV show.
That's a pretty good analogy, and I didn't think about that. And just going back to what you said earlier about house parties, I am very familiar with house parties. I didn't go to a lot of house parties growing up, but the house parties, you can't go to a house party without a DJ being there. A DJ is what makes the party. It's what makes the house party. What keeps the people dancing. And it's what keeps the people having fun and being around other people that like to have fun as well. So what's a house party without a DJ or without a DJ Skinny?
Boring.
It's boring, right?
Boring.
Yeah. All right. So today's theme is resources for DJs and radio stations in New York. And just to reiterate, to our listeners, I said that in a previous podcast that I did with another DJ or with other DJs that are also a part of the Fleet DJs organization, we only focused on Atlanta. Atlanta is one of those spots where you will literally see every particular venue around the corner. There's so many DJs in Atlanta than ever before. But New York is what got the DJ game started, just like hip hop. Hip hop came from New York.
Right.
And in New York, it's so competitive. It is very, very competitive. It has always been very competitive. How hard is it for a up-and-coming new DJ to find certain resources to get himself or herself out there? Is it really that hard in New York?
Now it isn't because, the technology of everything and, social media outlets and, various platforms where you can expose yourself. So I wouldn't say that it's hard, but I would say that you would have to have the work ethic in order to achieve it.
Okay,
because
now.
you have to be super busy. You always have to put yourself out there. You can't take no days off, because the minute you take a day off, that gives somebody an opportunity to get where you wanted to be.
Okay, so there's no vacation time, no vacation, no day off. You have to work, 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 grind, grind, grind.
I mean, you can, just like with anything, you can take vacations and you can take breaks, but that only going to lead to you getting to your end goal, a lot longer.
Now, let's talk about the resources in New York. Let's talk about when people hear me use the term resources a lot, they automatically think venues, in which we talked about also in the previous podcast. And
Mm-hmm.
so, what are those popular, well known places in New York that have been or are famous for DJs to come out and say, hey, this was the spot that helped me get to where I am at today? What are those resources in New York or those venues?
Um, First and foremost, um, where it all started in the park, and then we took it from the parks. When we took them from the parks, we took them to the basements, and then once we took them from the basements, we took them to the clubs, and then from the clubs, we took them from the clubs to the radio, and then within those different phases of you growing within your DJ career, you're meeting people, and as you're meeting people, you should be gaining. You should be networking and coming into opportunities while you help to grow yourself as a DJ. So it's pretty much, in order to grow to be a DJ, like a top-notch DJ, you have to align yourself with some pretty important people. Some of the movers and shakers in your city. Well, New York City, since we're speaking on New York City right now.
Now, you mentioned it started in the park. And so
Right.
my vision of it is a DJ taking his or her turntable, plugging the equipment up to wherever they can plug it in, and they just start playing in the park. Is that something wise for a aspiring up and coming DJ to do in today's society?
Well, of course, is no longer that aspect of DJing, like the park jams and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
That's, I mean, although it does happen, but you hardly see that go on now. You know what I'm saying? Right now, in the current, people are starting in their bedrooms. You know what I'm saying? So you go from your bedroom and you maybe do a few parties. You get some buzz in your neighborhood. People start to know you. They start referring you out to other people. And then that's how you grow now as a DJ. And still, you still have to network. You know what I'm saying? You still have to network. You still have to be a people person, because in order to get from one step to the next, you're not going to be able to do it alone. You always going to need somebody to pull you from point A to point B. That's without a doubt. So you're going to always have to network your way to where you want to be as a DJ. You could want to aspire to be the best DJ, the best club DJ, or be on the biggest artist tour, or you want to be radio, or whatever it is you want to be. You're going to have to network yourself to that point.
And we're going to dig deep into the networking aspect. We're going to come back to that in just a few moments on the BV Mobile Apps podcast. For those who are just tuning in to the BV Mobile Apps podcast, I have DJ Skinny of the Worldwide Fleet DJs. He is also the East Regional Manager of the Worldwide Fleet DJs. And we're going to talk a little bit about that also, too. There's so many layers that we got to peel off during this interview because, of course, today's theme is resources for DJs and radio stations in New York. So, DJs, please pay close attention to all the information that we are giving to you today on the BB Mobile Apps podcast. Now, let's take off the park thing off the list, because back in the day, like you said, that was something that was the end thing to do back in the day. But now people are doing it from their bedrooms. So does that mean that social media has to be involved when a person is DJing from his or her bedroom? Do they have to do it by way of virtual?
Now, interesting that you would say that, because now currently social media would take the place of the park jam. You know what I'm saying? In the park, you would bring your DJ set out, and as you start to play music, people start to gather around it, and you form a crowd, right?
Right.
Now, that aspect has moved to social media. Now, you in your house, you turn your DJ set on, you turn your camera on, you go on Facebook or IG or Twitch or whatever platform you're going to use, and people are going to gather around now. So it's kind of like the same thing, but two different eras and two different forms of technology.
Okay, I can see that. A great example to me would be Questlove from The Roots. What I've been seeing him do lately, especially since COVID-19 kicked in, he's been doing live streams of him DJing from whatever location. It looks like he's DJing from his basement. But it's just so good to see Questlove doing that for his followers and fans, because it's almost like he's presenting himself as a new artist to the scene, and he's been in the game not as a DJ but just as a overall musician. We all know him as the drummer for from The Roots, but it's like he's a new artist to many of us because he's doing something that we don't normally see him do. But that is without the crowd being in the same room or in the same space as him. So I can see so many DJs like Questlove and artists doing the same exact thing. As far as the monetizing aspect of it, I also see people making money or asking people or encouraging people to donate money to what they are doing by way of virtual. Is that something you would encourage new DJs to do, is ask or encourage people to help support the cause of them DJing by way of virtual? Is that something that you recommend new DJs to do, or do you want them to, or do you recommend that they take the money aspect out of it and just learn how to perfect their craft first before they see any type of residual?
I mean, at the end of the day, we're in a rough situation right now. You know, DJs can't make no money. Clubs are not open. Can't really do parties. So you have to find a way to make up that income. So if you find yourself in that type of situation, I mean, honestly, I don't see anything wrong with you asking for donations. You ain't forcing nobody, you know, to donate to you. If they want to give to you, then they will. And if they don't, they don't. But it's definitely a good idea. You got to make up that income.
And that applies to new DJs too, right? Like, even if a DJ messes up or it's their first time actually getting into the game, and they just putting themselves out there for people to start recognizing them. That goes for brand new amateur DJs as well too, right?
Yeah, that I mean, that's for anybody. You got old heads in the club. You got DJs that just started 2 weeks ago in the clubs. So it applies for anybody. We all, you know, just because the situation is how it is right now doesn't stop the bills. So you gotta find ways to keep your bills paid. So most definitely.
Okay. So that's one resource. Now, when it comes to venues in New York, and I want to go back to the question that I asked you earlier. When it comes to venues in New York, what would you say were the venues back then that really helped get DJs to where they are at today, like a DJ Busy Bee or a DJ Kid Capri or a Red Alert. You have conversations with them. These are all veterans in the game, and they tell you, well, I got my start from performing at this particular venue. Like, what would you say were those venues back in the day that really got that?
How far are we talking?
let's go back to the 70s. Let's go back to the 70s. Let's do late 70s.
Oh man, we talking Rooftop. We talking Studio 54. We talking the Fever. Oh man, it's so many spots where you had. If you was in those spots, you know, it's kind of like you made it as a DJ if you was in those spots.
And the reason why I asked that question is because for the newer DJs, it's important that they know what these venues are and what they meant for the culture. For people, for well-known DJs that have started out at those venues. And so for those new bugs, those new DJs that are hearing the answers of, you know, Studio 54 and this place and that place, are they still standing to this very day, or is it just a part of the legacy of the hip-hop culture?
Right now, those venues are like cemented in the hip hop legacy. They aren't actually standing today. But if you a DJ in the New York scene and you of a certain age, I would say if you of the age of 35 at least, you should know about those venues. I wouldn't expect a 20-year-old DJ to know about those venues, but if you 35 and older, you should know about those venues.
Now, what about the new venues? Are there any new venues out there today for the new generation of DJs? I understand we still are in a pandemic, as those venues may not be open to the public right now because of COVID-19. But what are those new venues in New York that are out there today for the new generation of DJs?
A lot of the clubs in New York got shut down, and it became like almost like a lounge town. So there aren't a lot of big clubs left in New York, especially hip hop wise. Probably that one hip hop venue that you probably want to DJ at is SOB's, because there aren't a lot of hip hop spots left in New York, actually. Everything is lounges and hookah spots now in New York City. New York ain't the big club scene that it used to be, like the Tunnel.
The Tunnel. I'm glad you said. I was just about to say the Tunnel.
Yeah, Home Base, the Tunnel. New York is light years past that now.
Yeah, shout outs to Funk Flex and rest in peace, Cap.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Wow. But the hookah spots and the lounges, those are the places nowadays in New York that a rising DJ can go in and shoot his or her shot there.
Absolutely.
Any expectations from those particular places, those lounges and hookah spots? Any expectations from those venues?
Of course, they want you to be able to hold a crowd. And with being able to hold a crowd, you have to know your music and know how to read the crowd that you have in front of you. Every record you can't play everywhere. You know what I'm saying? You got to know the crowd that's in front of you. Sometimes you got to take risks. Let me see how this record gonna do. You know what I'm saying? And you throw that record on. If it catch, then you know you can continue in that direction. If it doesn't catch, then you know you got to resort to something else. But you have to know the crowd that you're playing for. That's a must. It's like you can't be in a lounge everybody is, let's say, roughly 40 and over, but you playing Gucci Mane. You know what I'm saying? Your catalog got to be a little more versatile in that. You got to be able to hit those classics. Got to be able to dig into the 80s, maybe some of the 70s, but you got to be able to dig between that 70 and 90 area. If you can't dig in that area, you're probably not going to be able to hold that crowd. And then most likely the owner or whoever hired you is going to tell you, you know, this just ain't working out. We don't need your services here no more. So you definitely have to be able to hold a crowd when you get in these spots.
New York, the epicenter of hip hop. And in New York, I know that there is definitely a different kind of cultural shock compared to other regions and other places throughout the country, especially in Atlanta. And something that you said that really hit the nail. We know that the down south music is just as popular as the music up north. And it's just very imperative that with New York being the epicenter, that you still have to play the classics. You still have to play the songs from the 70s and the 80s, especially the 90s, you know, the golden era of hip hop. And so nowadays, do you like, especially in New York, do you find a lot of DJs playing the down south music compared to the music from New York or from the East Coast? Do you come across that with a lot of DJs or just some DJs?
I'm gonna say prior to the pandemic, before everybody was trapped in the house, New York was heavy on the South music. Probably more so than New York music because that sound of New York has actually been missing from hip hop. So it's not like they really had a choice. Since the pandemic and you have all the DJs going online and DJing, I found that DJs are playing a lot less of the South and trap music, and they're digging back into the 70s, 80s, and 90s era playing music. So hopefully, when the party and the club scene opens back up, that transitions into what they do in the club. But most definitely before the pandemic and the clubs and the parties was popping and going, yeah, it was definitely a lot of South in New York.
So with that being said, DJ Skinny, could that mean there will be maybe new resources that New York, places like New York, could open up new resources for DJs to come in and play those classic records and play those old school hip hop songs from back in the day in New York? Is there a possibility that could happen after the pandemic?
I'm hoping that that's what comes out of this, because like I said, you go in the club, it sounds like just like you in Atlanta, but you actually in Brooklyn or Queens somewhere in the party, but you would think that you was in Atlanta. That's how heavy New York is on that sound, because unfortunately the New York rappers stopped making that New York type of music and they fell into what was hot. And the Southern music was hot, so that's what they started doing. So we kind of lost that New York sound, but it's coming back slowly. It's coming back.
Great information so far by DJ Skinny. For those who are just tuning in, I'm talking to DJ Skinny from the Worldwide Fleet DJs. The architect here is Sean Garvey, and make sure you follow us on social media at BV Mobile Apps. This is the BV Mobile Apps podcast, in which we're talking about resources for DJs and radio stations in New York. This is a continuation from our previously aired podcast, in which we talked about resources for DJs in Atlanta, but this time we're talking about resources for DJs and radio stations in New York. Now let's switch gears for a few moments, DJ Skinny, and let's talk about radio stations in New York. Okay, so radio stations. First two radio stations that come to my mind are, of course, the legendary Hot 97 and Power 105.1. And those two stations, I remember back in the day, one of the stations, Hot 97, it opened doors for a lot of DJs, especially underground DJs, even opened the door for DJ Armstrong. And so now, fast forward, in the 21st century, of course, radio has changed. It has evolved over the years. And so with those radio stations, with those kind of radio stations in New York, are they still the platforms for new and rising DJs to come in and showcase their talent? Can that still happen with those kind of radio stations in New York?
I believe being an FM DJ is still good, because being an FM DJ is the big deal by saying, you're associated to a radio station. However, I think that DJing on an established online station is the bigger deal to me. The reason I say it's the bigger deal because you have a much bigger reach. FM radio is just local. It may stretch a few cities. It may even reach into the next state, but it is still local. People in Virginia can't listen to Funk Master Flex by turning on the radio. They have to go through TuneIn or an app or something. They can't just turn on the radio and listen to Funk Flex in New York. So FM radio is local, and it's the bigger deal because of I guess those are the people that the record labels seek out first. So it kind of makes them the bigger deal. But ultimately, if you can DJ for an established online station, your reach would be much further because it's global. Anybody, anywhere can tune into you.
Okay, so what you're saying is that for a up-and-coming new DJ, they can reach out to more of a further and larger audience by going towards an online radio station versus an FM station. Am I hearing you right?
Right. Just look at it. If you DJ for, we're gonna take New York City. We're gonna take New York. Hot 97, New York. Hot 97 pretty much serves the tri-state area, right? Mm-hmm. Outside of that tri-state area, nobody's gonna hear you unless you're a Funk Flex and you just a household name DJ. You know what I'm saying? You got DJs on Hot 97 right now who I'm not won't mention any names, but there's people that's probably in Maryland that never heard of them.
So how would a DJ get on an internet radio station, especially in New York, to where he or she can be heard globally? Is it a situation where they have to create their own internet radio station, or do their research, do their own diligence to see what internet radio stations that are out there in hopes of landing an opportunity for that particular internet radio station?
Well, I'll take you on a little journey through, how, I got radio opportunities. I want to say 93, 91, it's somewhere between 91 and 93. I started doing pirate radio. I don't know if you're familiar with pirate radio.
I am.
I started doing pirate radio in New York City, but somewhere between 91 and 93. And from doing the pirate radio and the mixtapes and other avenues in which I was DJing, that awarded me opportunity to move on to other stations. And then I started doing online radio. I was doing Beat Miners Radio for a while, and then I went from that to Fleet DJs in 2000. What is this? 2020? I want to say about 2010. DJ OS, who is the president of the Fleet DJs, he came across one of my podcasts. And through my podcast, he reached out to me and was like, yo, you know, I'm from the Fleet DJs. My name DJ OS, such and such and such. We got a radio station. I would listen to your podcast. I would love for you to be on the station. You pretty dope. We'd like to have you on the station. And, and from that, I started branching out to other venues, stations in North Carolina, FM stations in North Carolina, FM stations in Nebraska, FM stations in Minnesota. So it's once you get your foot in the door once, it's just going to open up other avenues for you. Now, the key is to get in the door. Now, how you going to get in the door? You have to network. Also, you have to be a good DJ, because you can't. We have a term called train records. Those are DJs, that can't really DJ well. They make a lot of mistakes. You can't go on live radio train wrecking. So you definitely have to have your craft down pat if your goal is to be on the radio, especially if you're going to be a mix show DJ. You definitely have to have your craft down pat. And you just got to network your way there. Start, probably intern, take coffee and donuts up to somebody at the station until they notice you. It's all about how you make yourself available and how you make people notice that you're a DJ. And not only that you're a DJ, but a good DJ at that, because that's how you're going to stand out.
If somebody comes into the radio station in New York and that person asks that individual, whether it's an employer, a staff member, this is just an intern or somebody that just want to get their foot in the door, like you said. Mm-hmm. Their answer is, well, hey, I want to be a DJ. I want to be a DJ at your radio station. Is that the right answer to give to someone at the radio station, or is that the wrong answer to share to other people?
First and foremost, you got to get in. You got to get in the station however you could get in the station. Most people that get in the station, I mean, they get in on the strength of somebody that already worked there to begin with. So if you're not part of that circle, you're going to have to jump through hula hoops just to get your foot on the grounds of that station. So whether it's you mopping the floors and you give somebody your mix CD and they listen to it and they give it to the program director, like, yo, this is the janitor. He gave me this ill CD. You should listen to it. And then, the program director might let you rock a mix master weekend or a guest spot, however they're going to do it. But ultimately, you got to get on the ground floor however you can get on that ground floor. If you gotta work for somebody there and get their coffee, if this is what you really want to do, if your goal is to be a radio DJ, you have to do whatever it takes, because that culture is a who culture. You know what I'm saying? The DJs that's in there, they bringing their peoples in. If you ain't part of their people, then your chances are slim at becoming a DJ on that station, unless you come highly recommended by somebody.
Right. So it's not what you know, it's who you know, and
right,
the circle that you have.
Right, absolutely.
Okay. All right. So let's say that I am an out-of-towner and I moved to New York and I still want to have that aspiration of being a DJ at a New York radio station. I'm not from New York,
Right.
but I want to be at a radio station. Like, how do I compete with that? How do I get into a New York radio station as a DJ from a different state outside of New York? I mean, I may have one or two family members that live here, but nobody don't know who I am.
Right.
So
Right.
how do I do that?
Oh man, I'm gonna say may the force be with you. I'm gonna say may the force be with you. I mean, unless you have an extensive DJ resume where you can contact somebody at the radio station and say, hey, look, I'm DJ such and such. I'm very much interested in coming to mix show DJ at your station. If possible, can I shoot my resume up there or my one sheet or whatever it is you're going to send up there, and hope, that your resume or your one sheet do the talking for you, and they willing to take a risk and give you a shot and put you on at 2, 3, 4 a.m. in the morning, when nobody's, when what they call not peak hours. That's your only shot, unless you actually know somebody that's going to vouch for you.
Now, let me ask you this, because at radio stations, there are politics.
Absolutely.
And for some shows, there's only a little bit of creative control involved.
Right.
So for a DJ who wants to come in, play their own set, play their own music, what politics are involved when using that particular resource for DJs? Is it where the music director, program director tells that DJ, oh, you can't play this, you can't play that? Is that involved?
Absolutely.
And how should a DJ handle that?
I mean, just speaking on past experiences working at FM stations, they don't. If it ain't part of their playlist, it's a no. You know what I'm saying? If you want to play a record from a new artist and it's not on their playlist, and you happen to play it and they hear it, they definitely gonna have a conversation with you about it. Like, who authorized this record to be played, and so on and so forth. You definitely, as a FM radio DJ, can't just play the records that you want to play unless you the top DJ of that station. Then you're gonna have more leeway than the others. Okay. But you definitely have to stick to the playlist music.
So unless you are, like you said, the top DJ there, like a Funk Master Flex at Hot 97 or a DJ Clue at Power 105.1, unless you one of them, you have to stick to the rules. You have to. You have to stick in the rule. Us DJs, we have like a saying of sandwiching records. Like when you do have a little bit of leeway where you can jump outside of the playlist, you got to know how to sandwich those records with the hits. You know what I'm saying? Like you'll play a Drake, and then maybe you playing a new record that you heard that you like, and you're gonna play that for a verse, and you're gonna get right back out of it and go into like City Girls or something. You got to know how to sandwich those records in so that it doesn't attract too much attention as that record wasn't authorized, we didn't approve that record. But this is only when you have a little bit of leeway you can do that. If you have no leeway at all, you can't do any of that. You have to strictly playlist. They'll give you a list of records. These are the records that are approved for your mix show, and you have to put your mix show together with those records. But it's definitely a handcuff gig. It's definitely a handcuff gig. So that's just one thing, or one of the many things I should say, to be aware of when you are DJing for a radio station, for an FM radio station?
Right.
Now, for an online radio station, which serves as a alternative resource for DJs, it's different politics there. It's a different beast there with online radio. Do you have more creative control over what you can play as a mixed DJ doing internet radio?
Oh, absolutely. You can play what you want, unless you're on a station that, let's say, may strictly be an R&B station, or that station may cater more towards classics or anything of that realm. So then you would have to stay in that realm of music. But there's not like, okay, you need to play these records and these records only. You most certainly got more freedom to play what you want.
So there you have it. Those are some of the expectations and things to look out for when using these kind of resources for DJs. Now, of course, another resource is networking events. And I know from Atlanta myself, born and raised in Atlanta, there has been plenty of networking events for DJs. Not only networking events, DJ Skinny, but also conferences as well. And what kind of conferences and networking events take place in New York for DJs to also get their foot in the door and network with people, or get advice, tips, and information from veteran DJs like yourself? What conferences and events take place in New York?
First, you got to hit like the artist events. Like if artists are having listening parties, you need to be in those, networking. If there's a showcase with artists, you need to be at those events, networking. Conferences in New York, DJ Con is one conference. What other conferences in New York? There are conferences that are not directly associated with DJing that you may need to attend. Like the DJ Expo is not necessarily New York, but it's New Jersey, and the DJs from New York travel to New Jersey for the DJ Expo. Anywhere where you can be noticed by somebody that has an opportunity to get you from point A to point B, you should make it your business to be there. No event is too small. Because even if you go to an event, let's say a mixer event is not a lot of people, probably 20, 30 people in that mix event. But out of that 30 people, it may be that one individual that can take you from point A to point B because they have the resources to do so. That person can be instrumental to your DJ career. So you can't really take the size of the venue per se. You just have to put yourself everywhere you can possibly be, because this is a name by face association type thing. You can DJ. You could put out 1 million mixtapes, podcasts, whatever. But if people don't actually see your face, that's what counts. People need to see you, and if they don't see you, you don't matter. So you definitely have to be seen. That's most important. You have to be seen. Because if you aren't seen, like I said, you aren't gonna matter. No matter how good of a DJ you are, no matter how dope you are, if people don't see you, if they don't see you, oh yo, I was at Usher's album party and I saw Skinny there, or I was at the Mobb Deep concert and I saw Skinny there. People gonna associate you with your face. And that's how your network grows. If you stay in your house, your network can't grow. So you have to put yourself out there as much as you can.
You have to be visible.
You have to be very visible. Very.
And also to add on to that, presentation is everything. You have to make a name for yourself also too by your brand, how you look, how you dress. It's also about presentation too.
Right. And you got to be willing to take a L. Most importantly, you got to be willing to take a L. And when I say take a L, when I say that, I mean everything ain't always about money. You know what I'm saying? You got to do something for free in order. You can't think dollars and cents in this game. You know what I'm saying? Because one, when you're trying to get on, you need to be as many places as possible. And if nobody knows you, they may not even be willing to pay you. You know what I'm saying? But if you say, yo, I come rock your party for an hour on the strength of me, you know what I'm saying? You ain't even got to throw me no money. By you doing that one party, you may find that 5 other people may want to hire you now just because you did that party and you didn't even get paid. So now by you extending yourself and doing that event for charity, you just picked up five potential people to hire you for an event. So you can't always look at it, oh, nah, if you're not going to pay me, I'm not going to show up.
Wow. And I've seen those type of situations, and I've heard those experiences take place before. So those are just some of the highs and lows when it comes to searching, finding, and executing a resource in New York for DJs, and especially landing a gig at a radio station or landing an opportunity at a radio station.
And as you know, New York is the mecca for DJs. So listen, every other person is a DJ here. So you really got to put yourself out there if you want to be noticed in New York City, because every other person is a DJ. You got a million people trying to get to where you want to be at as a DJ. So you really got to extend yourself out here.
Now, we only got a few minutes left here on the BV Mobile Apps Podcast. DJ Skinny with the architect here, Sean Garvey. Fleet DJs, the more the merrier. I know there's plenty of people that still want to become a fleet DJ and sign up to be a part of your movement. How can one, because fleet DJs can also be served or considered as another alternative resource for DJs, especially in New York. So how can one become a DJ for the worldwide fleet DJs?
That's simple. Just by going to the website, www.fleetdjs.com. You fill out an application and someone will reach out to you to set up an interview. They'll talk to you, go over your DJ history, some of the things you've done, some of the things you're looking to achieve as a DJ. And, if they feel, you're a perfect fit for what we're trying to do and where we're trying to go as a brand, then, we'll be happy to bring you along.
And this is coming from DJ Skinny, the East Regional Manager of the Worldwide Fleet DJs. I just thought it was only right, DJ Skinny, that we mention your position again, because you hold a very powerful and important position within the 4 walls of the Fleet DJs.
Right.
Yeah. So that is definitely big right there.
The eastern border. The eastern border of the United States. That's all me.
Yeah. So everyone can catch you. You all over the place, DJ Skinny. You on 95.7 FM in Omaha, Nebraska. You also on WWRN 620 AM, as well as on other radio stations across the region, across the country. Not only that, but you have your own BV mobile app as well.
Right, absolutely.
Okay, so how can one catch you on some of these platforms and also download your app at the same time?
Okay, as far as catching me on platforms, because I do have platforms where I'm there weekly. I also do a lot of bouncing around on platforms. So the best thing to probably do is to follow me on social media. And you can find me on all platforms on social media at Skinny Can DJ, SKINNYCAN DJ. That's your best bet to just follow me, because I'm always posting radio shows and so forth. As far as the BV mobile app, which is Tri-State Radio, you can find that currently in the Amazon store and Google Play. Still working on Apple.
And I cannot forget, DJ Skinny, Fleet DJ Radio every Thursday night at 10 p.m.
Absolutely.
You can't forget that. It's internet radio also, too. So I know DJs like yourself, you can play whatever.
Right.
And still have a great time doing it.
Right, and not only that, we have a whole network of stations, so we have music for everybody. You like country, we got that. You like gospel, we got that. You like top 40, we got it. You like house music, we got that. You like EDM, we got that. We got a station for everybody. So
something for everybody. I like the sound of that. Well, DJ Skinny, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to speak to us right here on the BV Mobile Apps Podcast. And we're definitely going to continue supporting your movement, the Fleet DJs. Much success to you in your future endeavors. And thank you so much for bringing us this valuable information.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was DJ Skinny from the Worldwide Fleet DJs on the BV Mobile Apps Podcast. Today's theme, resources for DJs and radio stations in New York. This has been another great episode of the BV Mobile Apps Podcast with your architect here, Sean Garvey. Make sure you follow me on all your social media at Sean Garvey on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at Sean Garvey ATL. And make sure you go to bvmobileapps.com to get your app customized right now. You need that in your life. Go to bvmobileapps.com for more information. Until then, we will talk to you soon. Take care.
It's a new year. It's a new day. We're starting it over. Starting the day.
Thank you for listening to the BV Mobile Apps Podcast with your host, Sean Garvey. For more information about BV Mobile Apps, visit the website, bvmobileapps.com. Don't forget to follow BV Mobile Apps on social media at BV Mobile Apps. Tune in again next time on the BV Mobile Apps Podcast.